So if we're going to spend billions of dollars on something, would it not make more sense to save American lives to spend it here on healthcare than bombing another country overseas?
It's the job of the United States government.
But what I'm saying is, if you're going to start saying American lives are specific, 47 people died, and this is worth going to war for, I would say 68,000 people die a year here, and that would be worth investing in as well.
Another heated debate unfolded on Abby Phillips' CNN show, as Leigh McGowan, Keith Boykin, and Josh Rogan went head-to-head with MAGA-aligned pundits Brad Todd and Lydia Moynihan. In this segment, we're going to break down some of the key moments from that intense panel, focusing on the exchanges involving Leigh McGowan and the rest of the guests, while I also share my own thoughts and perspective throughout. So, let's get straight into it and break everything down together.
Tonight, what exactly is the timeline for when this war with Iran will be over? So far, we've heard weeks, not months. We've heard soon. We've even heard that it's already over. But now Trump has a new answer for that question.
When it's over, and I don't think it's going to be long, when it's over, this is going to bounce right back so fast.
When are you going to know when it's over?
When I feel it.
Okay.
I feel it in my bones.
Feels it in his bones.
And COVID will be over by Easter.
How are the rest of us supposed to know?
Yeah, I think the president needs to be more disciplined when he's doing these interviews and stay on message. I think when he's done videos where he's reading prompter, where he's sticking to his talking points, I think that's the most effective way. We need to hear him communicate more to the American people, but making kind of vague statements like that is not helpful. I understand, I think the argument they would make is that they don't want to telegraph a specific timeline to the enemy. But again, I think you can be a little bit more disciplined and on message than he was in that interview.
I mean, I think he plays pretty fast and loose with other people's lives and money. And I think that's where we are here. I think, he's always said things off the cuff. Like I was saying earlier, he said COVID would be done by Easter. That was just off his top of his head. He said he would know when things were bad based on his own morality, which made many of us nervous. I think that's the reason we go through Congress for wars, because if you're going to be spending our money and our lives in a conflict, it should go through our representatives, which it didn't. And now there's one person making these huge decisions for everyone, and he's doing it based on his bones.
And every day it's a little bit different. I mean, he was asked tonight by a reporter about he talks about unconditional surrender that he wants from Iran. What does that mean? Here's what he said.
Still expect unconditional surrender? And what does that mean?
Well, to me, it means very simply that we are in a position of dominance that nobody's ever seen before. And whether or not they're able to say the words or whether or not they're able to even fight.
It's just so vague. And I think, you could argue right now we are in a position of incredible dominance over Iran. Could we end it today? Could we end it tomorrow? Where are we headed?
Well, we want Iran to be completely militarily decapitated, unable to export terror to the region and to Americans who live abroad and are threatened shipping lanes. We want Iran to not be a menace. They've been a menace for 47 years. Americans have paid for it with their lives every single decade under every president. That's where this ends, is a decapitated Iran.
I want to go back. How will we know that? Is it when the Strait of Hormuz is opened again? Is it when they stop sending off missiles? How will we even know? I think this is where there's a gap here between even for Iran to know, how do they stop this thing? Well, if they wanted to surrender, how would they surrender?
I don't want the president to outline exactly to Iran what his timeline is to get in, out, or do anything. But I will say, I don't think he should be answering questions every single day and multiple times a day. I mean, Joe Biden was nearly dead, and that's why we didn't see him for weeks at a time answer questions.
Here we go again.
And so I think President Trump should be a little more restrained in how often he speaks to the press about these things, and then do so deliberately and not on the tarmac.
But he's not. You all can talk about how you want him to be more disciplined and restrained, but he's never been that way. He never will be. We know who he is. And, he said unconditional surrender from the beginning. Everybody knows what unconditional surrender means. The Japanese gave us unconditional surrender of World War II. They capitulated. They quit. They stopped fighting. They gave up. That's not what's happening in Iran. It's not going to happen in Iran.
Unless we do the same thing to them.
Well,
yeah.
Well,
look,
we should not do, for the record.
Josh, let me ask you this, because, Trump was asked about the objectives in the war. And how it might compare to what Prime Minister Netanyahu wants. Here's what he said.
Regularly, are you speaking with Prime Minister Netanyahu? And are your objectives the same in terms of ending the war?
Well, I think they might be a little different, I guess. They're a different country than we are. But he will tell you there's never been a power like the power of the United States.
There you go.
How does that work? Are we running two parallel operations?
I disagree with both of you. I think Trump should keep talking, because you find out all sorts of interesting stuff all the time. And because the whole world is hanging on his every whim,
yeah, I want to know what he's thinking. And what he did was acknowledge something that a lot of people have been reporting for a long time, which is that the U.S. and Israeli war objectives are diverging. And the longer this goes on, the more it seems that Trump wants to wrap it up and Bibi wants to keep going, okay? And that the Israelis have certain objectives in terms of what they want to see in a future Iran. And Trump doesn't care about those things necessarily. He cares about more narrow objectives of military, maybe nuclear objectives, but not total regime. That's a pretty big difference. That's not to say the two countries don't overlap or they don't fight well together or they're not great militaries or great at shooting.
Isn't their objective both the same?
But Trump said it. So now
no Hamas,
are you
no
going to deny
Hezbollah,
that U.S. and Israel have diverging
Syria.
views? Do you agree with Trump?
I think their two objectives are to eliminate Iran as the source of terror and mayhem in the Middle East. That's their objective.
How? So it's like if Trump says stop, it's over, we won, and the Israelis are like, no, we're not safe. The Israelis are going to keep going, and then the Iranians are going to keep going, and then what's going to happen? Then Trump's going to keep.
I want to go back to something Brad Todd said a moment ago, because MAGA voices keep repeating this 47 years line over and over again, and at this point it feels like it has been said thousands of times across TV, YouTube, and social media, turning into one of their main talking points. But Brad Todd also brought up the idea that Americans are in danger because of Iran, and the argument seems to be that if we place our military bases near them, then our soldiers could be at risk. Which raises a bigger question about how threatened everyday Americans actually feel. Because speaking personally, I have never felt directly threatened by Iran, and instead, I feel more concerned about my own government, since situations like getting pulled over by the police can escalate quickly if you do not follow orders exactly as expected. And even basic things like not paying taxes can land you in serious trouble. And we're about to get into what Leigh McGowan has to say, because her perspective is really strong and worth hearing. But for me, the bigger fear comes from the healthcare and insurance system, where getting sick can lead to overwhelming costs even if you have coverage. So overall, it feels like many Americans are not fully buying into the fear narrative pushed by MAGA pundits like Brad Todd and Leigh McGowan about Iran. And I am curious to hear your thoughts in the comments. Whether you have ever personally felt that Iran is a real threat to you.
And Israel decides to keep fighting after America says stop, we are the ones that will pay for it.
Our inflation will go up and their children will die.
How about the 46 Americans killed on 10/7 by Iranian funds? Did they pay for it? The 46 Americans killed in Israel on 10/7, did they pay for it? They paid for it. They paid for Iran. There are 46 Americans there. There were 8 taken into captivity. They paid for the American politicians' tolerance of Iran.
That was Hamas. That's not Iran.
You've talked about Americans dying. You just said 68 Americans.
46 Americans.
46 Americans. But here's the thing. We're spending, what is it now, $3 billion a day?
Are you putting a price on those 46 lives?
Here's what I'm going to say, so let me finish what I'm going to say, because obviously I'm not putting a price on those Americans' heads. What I'm saying is, you're saying 46 Americans died, so we should attack this country because they're a terror organization and we need to come and get them. I could tell you here at home, 68,000 Americans die a year because they don't have health insurance. So if we're going to spend billions of dollars on something, would it not make more sense to save American lives, to spend it here on healthcare, than bombing another country overseas?
It's the job of the United States government.
But what I'm saying is, if you're going to start saying American lives are specific, 47 people died, and this is worth going to war for, I would say 68,000 people die a year here.
And that would be worth investing budget, by the way, you're looking at the vast majority goes to entitlements, Medicare,
the vast majority
Medicaid.
goes to the military budget.
Okay,
once you have a policy of eliminating all of our enemies, you're calling for war on North Korea, China, Russia.
Okay.
And that is
I think the difference with Iran is that it's the largest
Let's back away from we have to eliminate all of our enemies. No, we have to manage the threats with the resources that we have.
We've spent 47 years attempting to manage.
There it is again. The 47 years line being repeated. And at this point, it really makes you stop and wonder what things might look like if a completely different path had been taken. Because as Leigh McGowan pointed out, what if instead of repeating the same narrative over and over, we actually chose to focus on taking care of our own people first? But the reality is, figures like Brad Todd and Leigh McGowan don't seem interested in that perspective at all, especially when you consider that roughly 68,000 people die each year due to a lack of health insurance. If that number doesn't raise serious concern in the richest country in the world, then what does? Because if they truly cared, they would acknowledge that this should not be happening in the first place. Instead, Brad Todd argues that the government's role is to eliminate enemies. But in reality, the responsibility of any government should be to protect its citizens, not to drag them into conflicts based on who political leaders decide to label as enemies. Just because figures like Donald Trump or Benjamin Netanyahu identify someone as a threat doesn't automatically make them your enemy or mine. And let's be honest, ordinary people were never asked whether they wanted these wars to begin with. especially when Donald Trump positioned himself as someone who would avoid new wars and act as a peace-focused leader, a claim that clearly hasn't held up under scrutiny. Personally, I don't believe it's the government's responsibility to start wars against countries that haven't attacked us. If there's a direct attack on our soil, that's a completely different situation. But Iran hasn't done that, which is why I don't view them as an immediate enemy. And in that sense, Leigh McGowan was absolutely right in what she said on CNN. When you really think about the trillions of dollars that have been spent, along with the countless lives lost, including innocent men, women, and children, it forces you to ask what could have been achieved if those same resources had been invested elsewhere. Imagine if that money had gone into alternative energy, healthcare, or improving the overall well-being of citizens. The United States might have been able to step back from constant involvement in Middle Eastern conflicts and instead focus inward, similar to the approach taken by other nations. And when you look at it from that perspective, it really makes you wonder just how different things could be today if those priorities had been set from the very beginning.